everyone. Welcome to our final episode of season 3. We're not sure how May is already here, but it's here. And we have our friends with us, the Merrills, Joe and Kristen Merrill, educators over 30 years, world-renowned speakers on all topics related to education and really that creativity and engagement piece. And we're going to talk about their new book, not brand new anymore, but new. To check out their second book that they've written. So you may have caught their first book full of innovation and ideas and things that you can really take the playbook and apply immediately. So it's a great resource. And this second book seems to be the same way. So we're so glad to have you guys with us and to call you friends and for you to take some time to talk to us. Will you talk to us just a little bit about how this book came about? Because of course, AI is everywhere now. And when you wrote your first book, it wasn't really AI in education. It wasn't the hot topic that we were all talking about, and here we are now. So tell us a little bit about that before we get started.
Well, first of all, thank you guys so much for having us. We really appreciate it. You know, this is not our first time with you guys, so you guys have us back, which just means the world to us. So thank you so much. You know, we love Indiana. We've got actual friends that come to Indiana. We've got you guys, and so everything about Indiana we love. So thank you so much for asking us to come back on again and for checking out the book. You know, I think that when you look at the first book, it came out at a very convenient time. We didn't realize it at the time, but it came out right before COVID. And I think teachers were thirsty, looking for ways they could keep students engaged throughout that whole time period, even a little bit after that. And then there was a little period post-COVID of digital fatigue, I think we could call that, where teachers were kind of like, I'm going to go back to some of these old ways of doing things the way that I've been doing things. And they kind of got settled in that for a little while. And then this little thing called AI came around. And then education kind of had to go through the ringer again. And so now we're at this pivoting point where even if you taught during COVID, it's completely different than if you're teaching now with AI. And so this kind of brought the inspiration for the new book. And we really just kind of narrowed down to what we liked as classroom teachers and what we always found ourselves coming back to.
Yeah, we kind of always found ourselves coming back to the same topics, whether AI was involved or not. And so a lot of the chapters in the book are things that we found ourselves talking about a lot with teachers, like assessments and what that looks like when you use technology and how to overcome hurdles that you're not used to using when things are new. And what's our pedagogy? Like, how do we choose what we're using in our classroom to begin with? And what we started seeing was that, you know, the way we look at our classrooms, it really doesn't matter whether you're teaching in COVID or not, or with AI or not. Like, all those principles were kind of the foundation for our classroom regardless. And so we thought, well, maybe we should put all this together in a book, but then also tie it with this idea of AI coming and how really people shouldn't be so scared of it, because it's not really going to change how our kids are learning, and not even necessarily how we're teaching, but how those principles, like once you identify the principles you want in your classroom, then you can figure out how AI can help you, do that.
I love that. And I think that first, let's address this, right? We can come up with barriers for everything. I was joking earlier about barriers to cleaning the house, right? I can find a barrier so that I never clean my house. There's always going to be something getting in the way. And I know that as teachers, there are some barriers to things in education and things that we have to overcome. But when we can work past those things, just how wonderful it is to watch the creative process with our students and they start to own their learning. So if you had to give advice to educators who were ready to just really let the creativity be unleashed in their classroom, like, what is the best place to start?
Well, I feel like your mindset, I think as an educator, I look at it as my responsibility to have a space where my students are going to feel safe, to learn with the unique abilities that they have, and in a modern way, right? I want to prepare them for the world that they're living in. And it's no joke. I mean, like, we're not living in the world that even I grew up in. And so that's a real thing. And that's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a good thing, but it's reality. And so I think coming at it from the idea that my learning environment's my responsibility, it, in a way, empowered me, because it was something that I could control and I could take ownership of, rather than just sitting around and someone else eventually telling me what I had to do.
Yeah, I think for me, it's all about the realization of creativity doesn't have to be something with markers and crayons. It certainly can be, but it can also be something where it's a dance, right? It is some type of project that maybe is just interesting to that particular student. So it's really about finding what students are into, building those relationships, getting to know what their talents are, and just figuring out ways for them to use their talents to be able to demonstrate and show their learning. And when they're able to do so, the learning sticks with them, right? It's going to resonate with them longer, rather than just saying, here's a lecture, here's a worksheet, tell me what you know about this, and here's some multiple choice questions. If they have to get up and they have to do a performance, right, they're going to obviously know what they're talking about, because if not, that performance is going to tank. And so it's just about realizing that, creativity means a lot of things. It doesn't just necessarily mean drawing a picture.
Yeah, and I love how you guys said something about preparing them for the world they live in, because you're totally right. The student that I taught 10, 15 years ago was content driven, preparing them for a college career. And it is so much more now. And if we do not give them a way to be creative, a way to take stake and ownership in what they're doing, we do not prepare them for the world ahead of them. I don't know what kind of job or college career path they could take, where if they can't think outside of a box and they can't work as a team, and we can't give them that independence in there, it's just a totally different ball game. I'm sure that all of us in here, we went to school in a classroom where every desk was in a row and you didn't talk to anyone except at recess. And we just cannot do that anymore and have them ready for the world that's coming. We can't shield them from things, and we sure can't put the giving them permission to be creative only when they behave a certain way or when they've earned it. Like, that really gets Dayna and I to the core. You don't earn getting to be creative. You build up a kid that needs something different to inspire them to learn through being creative. So I love that you guys said that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, sometimes you'll notice that the most creative kids are also the most problematic. It's usually because they have to have some kind of release, right? And once you can identify that, you're golden. They'll be all in, and they're going to be invested in their learning because they actually now have that, like I said before, that outlet for them to actually pursue. And it's interesting to them, right? That's just the thing, is it's hooking the students. It's making sure that they're engaged. And I mean, that's kind of like what we're all about. So,
well, it's like relational.
Yeah.
And that's how the first book started too. Like, you have to build that relationship with the kids. They need to feel seen. And when they see that you see them and that you care about them, then you get that buy-in with them. And then the creativity, whether it's through tech or not, then starts to push them, and they'll start to do things that might be a little bit more advanced than what they really can do. But because they have the interest and they have the relationship with you, they're willing to work a lot harder.
One thing that I think that you mentioned in your book, and I think it's spot on, is the fact that we kind of build this idea of, well, I just don't have enough time. Where do I fit that creativity piece in? And you mentioned something that I do all the time too, is the fact of you take what you're already going to be teaching and then you just tweak it or layer it with some creativity or some different choices. So can you elaborate on that maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the things we find a lot when we talk to teachers is that, like, sometimes they're still so regimented and like, this is how I do my lecture, and then this is what we do together, and then this is what the kids do on their own. And sometimes, like, you can have them do something and just assess it at the same time and not do three things, you just do one. And so teaching teachers, like, how sometimes those projects, depending on where you put them in the order of your unit, what kind of assessment they become, and kind of really looking at, is it summative? Is it the very end? Is it a formative, something I do in the moment? They can kind of like double dip, right? And so this idea that not everything necessarily has to be a percentage grade, I think that blows people's minds, right? You can give a certain task, like something really simple, like drawing like a picture slide with pictures, and that the kids make a video of, and you could like walk around and you could know in 10 seconds by looking at their pictures whether they understand the concept. I don't need to give you a 25 question multiple choice test, right? And so that's the whole purpose of assessment anyway, really, at the end of the day, is for us to be able to identify what students still need help. And so I find that in these creative projects, it's way faster for me to identify those students than it is for me to go through a whole unit, then give the test, then grade them, and I've lost 2 weeks when I can see it every day walking around my classroom. So for me, I find them, once you get into that mindset, way easier. And two, I think the biggest mishap is not thinking about your end before you start. It's like, what are the things that I need my students to know at the end of this unit? And then as you go back, everything you build, does it tie to one of those things? And so sometimes teachers come up with a really creative project and it's fun, but it doesn't really hit those end goals. And so that's where I think like the wasted time comes in, because they say like, oh, I just don't have time to do this because it doesn't meet. So just create them to meet. And so I find I actually end up having way more time, and I end up sometimes having to not do the creative projects and go back to like the normal things, because once you start to see it for what it is, it's all the elements of teaching, the assessment, the monitoring, it's all there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head too, because I think a lot of times educators look at creative projects and they think, I'm grading this as a final grade for a project. And there's so much more that goes into it than just the overall product at the end, right? There's so many things that went into that. And it's like if you were to take a 2 or 3 year old and have them asked to draw a picture on a piece of paper, you're not going to know what that picture is, but that little kid is going to say, oh, this is this and this is this and this is, and they're going to be able to explain that picture to you completely with full details, whether you've asked them to or not. And so it's kind of like that, so you have to make sure that you take a step back as the educator and you like really say like, wow, like there's a whole lot of learning going on here. What can I use as an assessment piece here, right? Mm-hmm. This is clear understanding of the content, because they're using this material in a way that is appropriate for the project right there. And so just little steps like that, I think will help in the process of using creativity in the classroom, because you're justifying the possibility of implementing it into your instruction.
Yeah. And sometimes those barriers, like I always ask myself, like, who says it has to be this way? Right. And sometimes there are certain things we have to do a certain way because we've been told. But most of the times when you ask yourself, like, who says they have to do this project as a poster? No one. Like you do, because you're saying that, because that's how it's always been done. Right. Who says I can't make a Minecraft world instead of this, report, right? And so sometimes when I started challenging myself that way, I realized that most of the barriers that were put in place were because I was following the people behind me, or I was following the ways I'd done it in the past. And so by just asking myself that question, when you teach kids, we taught when we wrote these books, like in a very, very competitive school. Florida has a lot of state testing, and our school tests very high often. And so coming to your principal to say like, hey, like I want to throw out a whole these ways that I do things, and I want to start, it wasn't a great conversation to have. And so I remember years and years and years ago looking at my principal and just saying, listen, let me do it for a quarter. If my scores tank, I'll go back to the way we've done it. Right. I never went back to that office again, right? Because when you're doing projects like this, like you said, those soft skills, all of the other things that kids are learning in addition to the standards are so much greater that you're teaching up here to this level, and your tests will always fall here. So when you convince a child to learn here, they can hit this easy. Yeah, they might not know how to bubble in a multiple choice test, or you might have to go over like silly things like that. But critical thinking is always going to surpass rote memorization. And so teaching kids to have confidence and having confidence in yourself and in your kids, and just taking it like even quarter by quarter, or like, seeing that was really helpful for me.
I love that. One of my favorite things to ever hear my students say would be after states testing, and they would say, what we do in class on a normal basis was so much harder than anything we had to do on that test. And you're right. They were already doing all of the critical thinking and the collaboration and all of the pieces that go together that build those skills that I didn't have to teach the test, and I didn't have to do all of these last minute reviews. So I love that you said that. And so let's go into the next piece of this conversation and really talk about the AI piece, because I think it's so special. And, to be able to be on the perspective where I got to see Magic School implemented K-12 and just to see the learning. But I do think it starts with educators being honest with how they're using AI, because that's how we teach kids about the AI literacy piece, and not to be scared. And it's not just a cheat, and all of the things that they had heard that we have to help them unlearn. And so one of my favorite things would be to teach teachers and to teach students, hey, here's how I used AI, and here's how it boosted my creativity on this, and here's how I took the 5 ideas it gave me and I molded it into something that was my own. So pick, I love how you organized being able to make the shift into creative use and technology, kind of really honoring these pillars. So let's kind of frame a conversation around this with some of your advice. And, because there are a lot of districts that are embracing AI, a lot of educators that are embracing AI, and there are some that are just starting to, try little pieces here and there. And I think that something else with educators is we like to be really good at something before we're willing to show our students.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we fight that we don't need to be the experts on everything, that it's okay to stand in front of our class and say, I've not used this generator before, but here's what we're going to do together as a class today to see how this works. And you're going to shout out really cool questions you asked and really cool responses. So Joe and Kristen, you guys kind of start us off here, and some of your favorite things to talk about when we think of these pillars.
First off, it was so hard to pick those pillars. I was looking over them again because I was like, oh my goodness, there are so many great things that we could say are foundational for our classroom. I will say too, as you were speaking, talking about where educators fall, it's kind of like where we fell on the spectrum. When AI first came out, I had nothing to do with it. I was like, I'm not going there. I don't have time and space for this. I'm a writing teacher, so all things like, and then of course, Joe was like all in, trying all the things every day, coming home with stuff. It was like super overwhelming. And so first I think I would say like, it's okay to be anywhere on that spectrum, right? Like just to identify like where you fall and letting people around you like know where you fall. Like, hey, I don't use it. I'm very unclear with how it all works, to all the way to, hey, call me with any problem you have. Because identifying those people in your building and be able to come together and help each other is like really important. Like in my building, I've jumped on the bandwagon. And so people know, like, I'm here to help with a lot of those things. And that's part of getting over the hump. When you don't want to do something, like half of just like getting frustrated in the moment and not having that person to like just answer the small little question that you need. So that would be one of my kind of things I'm talking about, using AI. The other one too is I don't think you necessarily have to use all of it all the time. And we do a lot of talking with teachers about how some AI is just great for teachers to use. And then there's some that's really great for students to use. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you pick a tool and everyone uses it all the time. So like when I started really simple, like with things that I knew would catch the kids' attention, like image generation or things like that, and found ways just to like add something like that really simply into my lessons and into my projects. And then you kind of like branch out onto how you use it. I think it also depends on what you teach, right? So I teach reading and writing, and then I teach history. So history is so much easier in my mind to use AI, to use like, chat bots and to talk with the kids about things and to prompt. Whereas with my reading and writing, it's very hard to use AI because one, it's copyrighted and it's really, not going to tell you much. And two, you want to have a lot of that creativity and that writing to be original and authentic. So grade, the subject you teach, I think all of those things kind of mix. And so I think, we say it somewhere in the book, the person sitting next to you is not going to be the same as you are. And so never go into a training and think that every single person has to look the same way, or don't feel bad. If someone's using something a lot more than you do, it might just be more applicable to what they teach.
Yeah, I think to kind of go back, so in the book, we talk about this, but there's not one tool. And now I was racking my brain because I know there's been a bunch that have come out since, even in the book, there's not one tool that does all of those things that you're seeing on the screen right there, right? And so I think for a new teacher, or maybe even a teacher who's just maybe got some experience using AI, you're not going to find one that's going to do all of these things. So I think it's more important to find what do your students need? What does your class need? Work your way back from there. Maybe they need some differentiation, right? There's plenty of tools out there now that can help you with differentiation. In fact, in my opinion, there's no excuse for people to not be differentiating now, because it's gotten so easy with AI that you can implement district-based resources, tools, and completely differentiate them. If you're starting from scratch, you can use AI to help you differentiate
how they demonstrate their knowledge and the tools they use to there's just so much.
And so I think it just depends on what you're looking for your students in particular. Maybe you've got that really core group of creative kids that maybe is differentiated and they need to have a creative outlet, right? That you want to pursue that. Maybe you got kids that are really into chicken jockey right now, right? And so you got to get the
That's all I hear. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get the gamification in there. And so it's just finding ways to work it into the instruction, but you're not substituting it for a worksheet. And we've said that to Monica Burns said that best. Yeah, it was task before apps. And I think when you look at it like that, look at the task, decipher which tool is going to be most resourceful for the students, and then figure out how it'll work. And so there's lots of them out there, and we go through the book with a couple of them, but you're not going to find one that does all of them.
Yeah, and like you said, none of your classes are the same. My class last year was so artistic. Like all they want to do is draw and create, like paint. This year, absolutely not. None of it. No one likes it. Everyone this year's really like digital design and really into like competing against each other and things online, which my class last year had no interest. And so it's just really, I mean, it's expected, right? It's a whole group of kids. But as a teacher, it can be intimidating because you can't necessarily take that file folder out every year and just do everything in the exact order that you've always done it, right? You take the file folder out and you look and say, okay, this is what I got to teach. And maybe this is how I did that. And I mean, you know your kids, right? So you're like, oh yeah, they're not going to do that this year. How am I going to change? And what do I have available to me? I think also maybe not taking all of the things in at once. That's another question we get a lot is like, what are your favorite apps? What are all the things you do? And people are pretty surprised that my kids this year use 2 apps, like pretty religiously, maybe 3 or 4 that I've touched on once or twice, but like there's 2 that I use all the time because the more familiar your kids the kids get with something, then the more efficient you become, and then you actually aren't wasting as much time teaching the app as you are using it. And I think that's really important too. I think teachers think they're supposed to jump in and use like 7 new things in a year, and that's just completely unrealistic.
And to piggyback off of that, we are still in the classroom, so we are still teachers. We don't pay for a lot of tools because we can't afford to pay for a lot of tools. Yeah. So, I think it's really important to know that there's a lot of tools out there that are free. Start with those. Look for the tools that are free. See
or that
what
your district
works,
provides.
or that your district provides.
For
Yeah, for sure. But there's plenty out there that you can use just looking and kind of experimenting that way. And you can kind of figure out, okay, will this work? Will this not work? Because like you said, I mean, what works for me may not work for you. Different classrooms down the hall might be different. And, it's all about the environment.
Well, one thing that also, as we start to close, that I heard you say is the fact that you take the standard that you probably have always taught or the standard you're getting ready to teach, and then you look for what is that special avenue that's going to bring in that creativity. And it's really great to also have that app you go to, your go-to app that you can help your kids build on and be creative with and feel comfortable in so they can have that creative outlet. So I think those are great suggestions. And it's been so great visiting with you today. And we've already learned a lot, but I'm telling you, if you don't have their book right now, you need to purchase it because mine is full of sticky notes of all the things that I'm going to try next. And center in on some of those apps that I've already tried and the additional ideas that they presented to me. So I can't wait to do that and dig in a little bit more with some of your creative ideas and innovations that you've presented in this book. So I just want to say thank you again for being with us. But we'll be speaking next at a conference here in Indiana with Keep Anna Learning. So if you have not signed up to go to that conference, you should. We will be speaking at 3 different sessions at that conference, and we're so excited to be able to share some of our ideas and some of the same things that we've learned from Joe and Kristen too. So that will be great. And then if you have any questions or want to connect with us or the Merrills, then please reach out to us, or what is your handle? How can they reach you guys?
We're at the Merrills EDU, 2 R's and 2 L's, because
there's 2 of us.
She hates it when I do that.
Nice. So reach out to them if with any questions, or maybe to connect with them and share some ideas and bounce some ideas off them, just like we like to do. We cannot believe that season 3 is at the end. We've had so much fun learning from all of our guests, but the Merrills also talk about how you can insert Minecraft education and the uses of that in their book. And we just visited with Andy Knieven, who is the guru on that, in April. So you can revisit that episode if you like, or any of our episodes, at the information there at the bottom of this slide. And again, on the next side, you can go ahead and send us any feedback, and that will help with what we want to do as far as in season 4, hopefully. So, and then if you want to reach out to us at all, we would love to connect with you and learn from you as well. So thank you so much again, Merrills, and have a great rest of your school year. Everyone out there, have a great rest of your school year, and you know who we are. YaySTEM!
Bye, friends. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.